So our next acrylic project, a landscape, or this time you can do buildings. So this is just an example of how to start. Is kind of where this is headed. Is background. See how the vertical brush strokes are different colors, kind of starting with some rough light and shadow, and just really mixing and building up layers. So there's a lot of interest going on. This would become windows. You can kind of see they're plotted out, but not super specific. This is a little bit more of a looser impressionistic approach, which just means it's not going to be 100% photorealistic, and we're going to be real expressive with some of the paint strokes. This is another example. You can see the source material, and this is just kind of showing you how you can block out your different areas. I'm kind of thinking of them in light and dark, so you can see this archway is kind of blocked out here, a little bit of a lighter. This rough kind of green blocked out for some of those foliage areas, and then eventually this will become that water kind of swooping around. Typically what's called kind of an underpainting. So you can see how these are just the first few layers, still really thin. So these are not real thick built up applications, not real textural at this point, but you can see the brush strokes and get the feel of how this is. So to kind of show you a little bit of the process and building up, I'm going to use a red background just to show you that it's okay to start with maybe an unexpected color underneath and add a different element. I'm going to just show you how I might approach blocking in areas of light and shadow. So I did a rough sketch. You can see a little bit of the lines there. Mostly I just want to know where my midpoint, how far down things are going to come. So for this archway, especially this lighter area, you want to probably work pretty quickly and maybe one of your bigger brushes. But right now, I'm kind of blocking in my lighter and darker areas. I'm not covering up everything. It's okay. I like that red showing through. I'm not going to leave any like huge visible brush strokes, but I am going to come back to it. But I am thinking about the shape of it as I do this. So this right now is a vertical up and down because it's going to correspond to this vertical here. Maybe a little bit of the yellow over here, because even though it's going to be darker, I still want some of the same, there's some of the same color in it. If I need to rough it up, if I feel like I got too much, I can grab a piece of paper towel and kind of smooth it in there that way. I do want to do this underneath part a little bit because it's part of the same structure. There should be some unity there. I'm going to go horizontal for these bricks. There's a real bright edge to this also, so I'm going to build up the darker areas, but I can kind of start laying in a little bit of almost like a patchy mix of light and shadow over here. When I come back and do these bricks, I'm not going to do them exactly. I'm not going to draw out every single line. So we're going to give the impression of bricks. Same thing, there's some bits of stone brokenness. There's some really bright greenery that's going to be in this area. So I can kind of start planning for that, just real loosely. So you can see now, I want that mix of the lighter with the red. Same thing over here. I don't want these big brush strokes here. I just want a little bit of a start of light and shadow interplay. I can also kind of rough it up a bit with a piece of paper towel. So maybe that's the beginning of it. It doesn't look like much, but this is a good way to start. So now let's say we want to start blocking in some of these darker regions. There's a lot of green and mold and moss on here, so I can easily start working here. I don't want this to overwhelm my background. I want a little bit of that red, poking through. I want this to be real loose. I'm going to be a little bit more specific right there for my edge. So the purpose is that I don't want to break up this highlight and shadow that's going on, and there's a lot more smaller bits of light and shadow going on here. So the size of the brush kind of corresponds to that. I'm going to kind of build up some of this with the green. Mix up like a little bit of a different tone for the green. And I'm not getting super specific with this. I will come back with a lighter green. I'll come back with a yellow for the highlights. So right now I'm kind of mostly just still blocking in some of these main shadow areas. So you notice I am doing kind of extreme dry brush. I barely have any paint left on my brush, just enough to kind of dig some in. So now I'm using that to establish some of the shadow areas without a lot of paint. I'm trying to pick up a little bit of the texture of what I got going on underneath it. As I start blocking in where a darker area is, so say, you know, maybe back here, I'm using a little bit of a lighter stroke back here to start with. So I'm not completely covering that up. I want that loose. And then anything that I have left on the brush is when I'm adding to some of the lighter areas, just to break those up, because I don't want those so solid.